Today we are going to be checking out Fantastic Four: First Steps on 4K UHD on iTunes. We'll come back around and check out the 4K Blu-ray when that releases sometime in the very near future. Now, I am going to be sharing just my thoughts on the audio and video quality. Again, these are my thoughts, so they may very well be different than yours. So let's go over a few tech specs. So this movie was shot on the ARRI 65 in 6.5K. It's got a 4K DI, it's PG-13, 114 minutes. Aspect ratio is 239:1, and just 239:1, so no IMAX shots in this digital 4K stream. And of course, the audio is in Dolby Atmos. And if you guys want to know what I'm using for these 4K reviews, there will be a link down in this video's description that tells you all about it, what it does, and where you can get it. But I am using 3 different display devices: my 55-inch Sony OLED, my 98-inch Sony Bravia 5 mini LED set, and of course my go-to 150-inch Sony Projector 8. So let's go ahead, let's jump into the Dolby Atmos mix first and foremost. Now, these are just rough estimates for my timestamps. I have cropped in a little bit, so you can kind of work around this if you're going to check this out for yourself. So this here is coming in at 4 minutes and 28 seconds. This is near the beginning of the movie where there is a montage of action going on showing what our Fantastic Four heroes are doing. And as you can see, for the most part, this is just a 7-channel lower bed mix, and it stays pretty much locked in 7 channels for about 99% of the time. And even with all of this action, as you can see, all 6 of my top channels, they are not really lit up right now. And check it out, there's all kinds of stuff going on. There is, well, obviously nothing's going to be going on here, but here we got Johnny Storm flying into the flames, which you would think you would hear some flames engulfing you in every direction, but nothing at all. It's only 7 channels, just in the lower half in the bed layer. Real disappointment, because this is Fantastic Four coming off of what I think is a pretty good mix from Captain America 4, which wasn't bad. And the Thunderbolts also wasn't that bad either. This is, for such, this is supposed to really kick off the new MCU. This mix right here is really quite a big letdown. And this is a bunch of really big montages. Here we've got the Pan Am building falling into the ground, which you should hear debris and everything floating above your head. But sadly, you do not get any of that above your head. Again, we're kicking this off really bad. Also, the bass response in that part, also very low as well. So let's move on over to 18 minutes and 54 seconds. This is our first introduction to Silver Surfer as she is coming down from the space. As she's coming down, you will hear those little yellow balls are actually choppers flying overhead. So some nice dynamic objects there. All 6 channels are lit up. However, though all 6 high channels are lit up with her vocals, so you will kind of hear her voice echoing in the top channels. And of course, those yellow balls are once again helicopters that are flying around above your head. And then we have what is happening in the lower 7 channels is just the ambiance with people chit-chatting and talking and stuff like that. So some nice ambiance. And again, you can see the chopper in the upper left corner as it's moving around in the yellow ball. So this is one of the rare, really busy, totally active Atmos dynamic mixes in this movie. So this is very effective. So let's move on out of this. Let's go over to 28 minutes, 19 seconds. This is just a really quiet scene. I figured I'd throw a quiet scene in here. Again, up top, it looks like it's really busy, but this is just really some really light score. And I mean really light. I actually had to mute all the 7 bed layers and just see what was going on up top, and it's really just music playing in the top channels. Also, music is also just playing in the lower channels as well. So, and then all of the dialogue remains in the center channel. It might look like it's really busy, but it's really just only music. And that's kind of a running theme throughout this entire Atmos mix. Now here we've got, this is a really interesting scene here. This is at 37 minutes, 55 seconds. Actually 38 minutes, 15 seconds. So this is the first time we get to see Galactus on his spaceship. As he's coming out, as he's rising from his chair or wherever he's rising up from, there's actually a ton anytime Galactus is on screen, there's a ton of bass in this. So unlike Superman, where the bass was kind of there, but not really, this has a ton of bass whenever Galactus is on screen. And the interesting thing about this is I had my crossover set on my speakers to 60 hertz. As he's coming out of the ground, rising up at 3815, I think, 3815, 3817, there's actually a lot of bass that comes out of the top channels. So whenever somebody tells you that there is no bass in the height channels, top channels, pop this in, turn off bass management, and you should hear bass coming out, at least in the top front two channels, because my top left front channel actually bottomed out in this scene. So I had to change it from 60 hertz on up to 70 hertz. I think most of you guys are probably using an 80 hertz crossover anyways, so you're not going to be affected by this. But I recently had switched over to some larger RBH speakers, the 821s, which can go a bit lower. But I haven't switched over my top channels yet. So I switched all the lower bed channels to 60 hertz, which are bass capable. Unfortunately for this scene, when Galactus came out, it really just bottomed out. And I was like, I thought I had ruined my top channel. But that comes in at 38 minutes and 17 seconds. Next scene is at 42 minutes, 43 seconds. This is the escape from Galactus's ship as the Invisible Woman is pregnant, so they're making their getaway, and they're being chased by the Silver Surfer. So this is a big action scene. The only real action we get to see is every time Johnny shoots his laser, it kind of swirls around that little tunnel that the Surfer is surfing in. This is very a la like Star Wars Millennium Falcon shooting the TIE fighters behind the Millennium Falcon. But except for the laser shots there, not much is going on in the top channels. Just some light music happening in the top rear channels. And then this is I had to edit this part out here, but as we are getting closer to the black hole, we start seeing some debris and all that engulfing you in the top channels, also in the lower channels. So this is a nice little scene towards the end of this specific chase. So this scene actually lasts for about 4 minutes or so. So for the first, I want to say like 3 minutes, 30 seconds, not much is happening in the top channels, despite there being a pretty heavy duty chase happening with the Fantastic Four and the Surfer behind them. So kind of a all right scene. It ends all right, but it starts off really disappointing. Another decent scene coming up. These are just all the standouts that I felt were worthwhile. This is at 1 hour, 11 minutes in. This is when Johnny is chasing the Surfer through the city. Actually, hold on. No, this is when Surfer is destroying all of the towers. Slight spoiler alert, but the Surfer is destroying some towers. But as she's flying through, music is playing in the top channels and nothing else. As the explosions are going off, you would think the explosions would be happening up top and in the lower bed channels, but it's mostly just music. And all the explosions are happening in the front three channels. So even though it looks like a really busy active mix, it's only active because it's music. Very disappointing. Like, once again, very disappointing. Coming towards the end here, hour 26, hour 27. Here we have the attack on Galactus, and this is like the biggest action scene in the movie where the Fantastic Four is fighting Galactus. Good part here is that there is a whole lot of bass in this scene. Every time he's stomping on the ground, you feel it. It hits really hard in that 30 to 50, 60 hertz range, so you can feel it in your chest. If you got some capable subwoofers, it feels like Galactus is walking in your home theater. Unfortunately, all this stuff going on, everything catching on fire, the Ben Grimm swinging this around, smacking it into the Galactus's hand, all of that just happens in the front three channels. Everything else is all music. I mean, that is all music. All 7 layers. I muted just the front three channels and listened to just the 6 tops and the 7 bed, and it was all very light music with a very sporadic, you might hear Johnny Storm really quickly zip through a surround speaker, but it was really very rare. All of this stuff, I mean, right here, you would think Galactus stepping overhead, you would hear something above your head, but you just don't. This is just all really light music. So despite this being pretty active for this end battle, it's all music. It's really disappointing. I mean, you might get distracted by the amount of bass during this scene because there is a lot of havoc that happens in the front LCRs and all the bass happening as Galactus is stomping through New York City. You might be distracted by that, but if you listen carefully, there's not really anything distinctly placed within the lower surround channels or in the top channels. And this happens pretty much the entire movie. It's mostly just music, and I found it to be very disappointing because I actually kind of like this movie. But that is the Atmos mix. Now, if we're looking for bass response, so this is the kind of output that I was getting in my room. Obviously, I get a lot of output down to about 63 hertz. At about 63 hertz on down is where you get a lot of that big, hefty chest slam. So every time he's stomping on the ground, it does hit really hard. And then it really starts dropping off from there, from about 30 hertz on down. My mic is not picking up anything below 30 hertz, so that's why it's not showing anything there. But again, for your place, depending on how many subwoofers you have, how big your room is, you might experience something a little bit different. But for me, the movie starts off with really weak bass during that big battle montage at the beginning at about 4 or 5 minutes in. The bass is really weak. It's really anemic. But as the movie progresses on, once we see Galactus, the bass does start picking up from there, especially when we get into the action scenes with Silver Surfer. And then with this grand finale, it does have a whole lot of bass. So kudos for Marvel for picking up the LFE department. Now, as far as the video quality, again, I had mentioned that this from start to finish, I don't know if this is going to change in the Disney Plus version. Unfortunately for Thunderbolts, it's still only 2.39 to 1. At least as far as I know, there is no IMAX enhanced version on Disney Plus. So maybe this is going to get the IMAX treatment on Disney Plus, but right now, if you're checking this out on iTunes, and I'm expecting on other platforms, it might be 239 as well. But as far as like HDR, we are looking at a max CLL of 997 and a max FALL of 463. I watched this in Dolby Vision. And if you're coming from Superman, I believe that was something like 187 and then 111. I know people were really disappointed about the HDR performance on that. However, on my displays, on my OLED and on my TV, it's really bright. It looks really bright. And this is I would say this is equally as bright, especially if you're watching this in Dolby Vision. Since we're talking about aspect ratio, I did come across this as I was doing a little bit of homework. So here we have a screen grab of what is on the digital version, which you're probably seeing at home on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side is a picture that somebody took from Lincoln Square, which is in New York City. Maybe 1.90 is the actual aspect ratio. So 239 would be what is happening in the center here. But if you're watching 190, the entire frame would be all of your picture information. And I believe they did this for Joker as well. They cropped in for the IMAX shots, the 1.43. Everything here in the center is the 143 is what they were touting as being IMAX. When in actuality, if you watch this in 190, that would be the true kind of open matte format for this specific camera. So whether or not they're doing that with Fantastic Four, I guess that's yet to be seen, but I mean, that looks like that might be the case. However, if we just go back to this, you can see in the 1.43 aspect ratio in the IMAX scenes, if you saw this at the theater, there's definitely more information top and bottom for the 143 version. Is Disney going to get the 190 version, or are they only going to be getting the 2.39? That is the question at hand. All right. Now, for HDR, as I said, here we have some great specular highlights. A lot of nice specular detail in this shot here. This is where Johnny Storm is flying towards the beginning of the movie. We get some nice stuff here as well. This looks very similar to Lex Luthor's lair in Superman. So we get some nice outdoor scenery here, nice bright speculars. Some nice contrast here with the black and the white in the background. Johnny Storm popping off the screen as well. This can get really bright. So I don't think anybody's going to be wanting as far as HDR is concerned. And of course, for shadow detail, I found that black levels on this did edge a little bit more on the really dark gray. This does look very similar to what Superman had looked like. They did add some film emulation to this, which you might be able to tell in this shot here. So despite this being shot in 6.5K, you don't really get that super crisp digital look from that 6.5K sensor. So that little soft fall off on edges and all that is meant to mimic a vintage look from the 60s and give it a slightly softer appearance overall. Still plenty of detail, as you can see here, in Ben Grimm's face, especially in this shot here. If you're watching this on digital, this might be tough to see in the screenshot, but there's definitely some very light layer of grain. Again, the black levels are decent, but I felt like they were slightly elevated, not super sharp and crisp in contrast to some other digitally shot films, like something like maybe Midway, Power Rangers. So in the shadow detail department, still decent, but I wouldn't say it would be my top pick for having the ultimate in black level. Now, overall, I think this, if you like the Thunderbolts, you're probably going to like this transfer. Thunderbolts, I would say, has a better audio mix, but visually, I'm going to put these really on par with each other. I kind of like this one. I mean, I did kind of like Fantastic Four. I did like the colors on this, so very much like Superman. The HDR does help with a lot of that color, makes it pop really nicely. Anyways, if I'm going to rate this, I'm going to go with an 8 for video. And then for audio quality, despite it being really busy, I'm only going to go with a 7.5 for audio. Because even though all 6 of my high channels were active for for a good portion of this movie, high channels are active, it's mostly just all really light music that you're going to hear in the top channels. And the bed layer as well. Those few scenes that I showed you with the dynamic objects floating around, those were the real standout scenes. Question is for you guys, have you guys seen this? Did you watch the digital version today, or did you watch it in some other way? Leave your thoughts down below. Let me know what your thoughts are on Fantastic Four. And was this your favorite movie, MCU movie this year? Or did you prefer Captain America or Thunderbolts? Leave your comments down below. If you do want to pick this up, I will leave some links for it down below in this video's description. Thanks for watching. If you want, you can follow me on social media, and I do have a Patreon, patreon.com/Shane Lee. If you want to join the crew over there, we have a really nice crew over there and some very informative chats going on 24/7. That's patreon.com/Shane Lee. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next video.